usually they've been through difficult times together. They've fought and come back together and figured out how to reconcile, because, if you believe family is as important as most people do, when you fight, you say, well, I got to make up with them. If there was a friend, I just don't ever have to talk to him again. But if it's my family, and you believe in family, then you figure out a way to make it up. Some of the most difficult places in the Bible when I was growing up were when Jesus would talk about family, because I grew up in a family that was faith-based, and they believed that God came first. However, they didn't think that the church came second. They didn't think our Christian family, our spiritual family, came second. They were clear that it was God and the earthly family, our people we were born to, and then everybody else. And church came in there somewhere, as well. You went there, but you didn't necessarily go there to get real involved in my family growing up. So when I would run across some of the scriptures we're going to read tonight in our lesson, I was quite perplexed. I was quite confused because of the way my upbringing was about family, and the way I would read some of the scriptures about that. So the family of Jesus, who was the family of Jesus? And before we actually go any further, anybody want to have any ideas or want to share with us your ideas of who Jesus' family was, if you ask him? Ron, you know, don't you? Well, if they ask him, your family's here, that's going to be what we're going to read first.
Okay.
Did he say Joseph, Mary, James? Yeah, if somebody wants to look up...
God, my Father. He'd always refer to God as his Father.
He said all of us are his family. Everybody's his brothers.
Everybody's, yeah.
So if someone wants to look up Matthew 12, starting in verse 46, and read that when you have the microphone. It's up here too, so we can all follow. You don't all have to look it up, but I thought somebody could read it out loud.
Okay. Matthew 12:46.
Uh-huh.
While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside waiting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside waiting to speak to you." He replied to them, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother."
So Jesus kind of perplexed the crowd, I suspect, because back in the Hebrew times, they were just as fond of their brothers and their sisters and their mothers and their family, and sometimes even more so. They were big on genealogies. They were big on family. So obviously that had to perplex the people in the room and make them think, who's my family? And he says, it's not the people I grew up with that y'all all know this. Not that they didn't become an integral part of his spiritual family eventually, but at least at that time he was making a solid point of who ultimately he came, he grew up, but he at 12 years old was about his father's business instead of going home with his parents, and they had to go grab him and bring him back and all of that, and he told them, "Don't you know I'm supposed to be about my father's business?" And then later in this situation once again, he's giving them something significant to think about. So having an earthly family should be a wonderful blessing, and for me it was a wonderful blessing, and hopefully everyone in the room it was a wonderful blessing, because it should be a source of love, a source of acceptance. It should be a stronghold of support and encouragement. And I would guess that people that didn't grow up in that kind of home didn't struggle as much with what I struggled with when Jesus said these kinds of things, because there's other things he said we'll get to later about family that were really confusing to me. But, if you had an atheist father or mother, if you had, a violent, abusive relationship with your parents, if you didn't get along with your siblings, then it'd be a lot easier to say, my spiritual family is more important to me than my earthly family. However, obviously, if you have a good family, then that's a different story. So the next little verse we want to read, and if someone will look up Mark 10, 28 through 30. So we're not limited to being in the physical family, and we hope we have a great physical family, but Jesus spoke of the existence of an extended family that's beyond the family that we have in our, beyond our earthly family. So if someone has Mark 10:28, Ruth.
Then Peter spoke up, "We have left everything to follow you." "Truly I tell you," Jesus replied, "no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age. Homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with the persecutions, and in the age to come eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first."
So my understanding is that Peter and his brother Andrew were in a business with their father, a fishing business, a pretty successful fishing business. And I can imagine, though we don't know this, and it may not have been true, but I could imagine their dad might not have been thrilled about them saying, "Bye, Dad, we're your chief people." I mean, when I went off to medical school, I was running our farm, and I was the chief foreman of our 100-cow cattle farm. We had 350 acres and 100 brood cows, and I did most of the feeding, my dad and I, but I was the one that was basically running the farm. And when I went off to school, he closed the farm and started selling it off as real estate because he couldn't run the farm by himself. We don't know, but I suggest that there might have been some aggravation at best when Peter and Andrew said, "Bye, Dad, we're going to follow this guy around and learn to preach." So they made big sacrifices, but when they made those big sacrifices, there was benefits. Jesus said, "You're going to have a family much larger than your immediate family. You're going to have a huge family. And you're going to have a family that believes like you do in God, in me, and you're going to have a unifying voice." And hopefully most of us have been in situations before where we've had people that we felt as close to as family because we went through difficult times with those people. I've never been blessed to have spent time in a warlike situation, in a war, in a military conflict type situation where people were shooting at me, and if I made it through with my brothers, there's a bond that would have been there forever. And my understanding in sports teams sometimes, then they go through very difficult times. And, my training, medical training is different today than it used to be. It's still not easy, but they prided themselves in seeing, if they could beat you down while you were being trained. And I have resident friends that I trained with 30 years ago that I haven't spoken to but once or twice, and yet if we get together, it's like we're all, we're brothers. And it all's just like we pick up right where we left off. And their relationship is because we went through very difficult times trying to get through what we went through together. And in order to have that feeling, that's why families are so close when they are so close, because usually they've been through difficult times together. They've fought and come back together and figured out how to reconcile, because if you believe family is as important as most people do, when you fight, you say, well, I got to make up with them. If there was a friend, I just don't ever have to talk to him again. But if it's my family, and you believe in family, then you figure out a way to make it up. You actually eventually get over your emotions and you hug them and you say, I still love you. And that's the way we should be with our church family, because too many people get mad at something that happens and they're off to the next church. There's one down the road, and I'm not happy with what's going on here, so we're going to go somewhere else. And if we have those deep relationships with our church family, like we hopefully do with our earthly family, we'll have that benefit of they're going to look at it because they love me, and they're going to look at why I did what I did, and we're going to talk about it like Matthew 18 says, and we're going to figure it out. But I suggest that the average Christian today doesn't actually have that relationship with his brothers and sisters in Christ like they should. So back to what we are going to spend most of the time on in Matthew 12, 46 through 50, as his physical family, Jesus' physical family was outside talking to him, he gave us the opportunity to talk about his spiritual family. And he looked around the room at his disciples, and he looked around the room at the people that were following him, because sometimes we have a hard time, I think, discriminating between apostles and disciples. But, there were his 12 apostles, and then that were following him, and then there were a much larger group of people that were disciples that were following him. And, he said, all of you, I love like I love those people outside. All of those people I feel a connection with because of the love for the Father. So before we get into kind of, the next step in the line, I want to go back and say, did Jesus have a family of hoodlums? Did Jesus have a family? Did he have a reason to say, those people out there I don't respect, I don't love very much because, it was a bad situation? Well, I think we all know, and we're just going to review quickly that his mother, Mary, Gabriel said, was highly favored. In Luke 1:28, blessed are you among women. You found favor with God in Luke 1:30. So obviously God's angel Gabriel said she was a good lady. So not somebody you would say, I don't want to associate with that person. She's been a mean person, a bad person, that sort of thing. And likewise, when she went to her cousin Elizabeth, Elizabeth said, blessed are you among women. Blessed is she who believed and trusted in the Lord and trusted in Gabriel and what was going to happen to her, because she could have been incredibly upset, and I'm sure shocked was a minor word when she found out she was pregnant, since she had never had a way to be that way. And what happens to us sometimes is not what we're judged by, it's how we respond to what happened to us. And she could have thought, I'm the biggest victim in the world. Look what's going to happen to me. Everybody's going to say I got pregnant out of wedlock. Everybody's going to say all these bad things about me. But in Luke 1:48, the famous prayer that she prayed when she was with Elizabeth, as she came to realize herself, henceforth all generations will call me blessed. She trusted in God. That's why God chose her. He didn't just randomly choose her, I don't believe. He chose her because he knew that she was the kind of mother that Jesus needed to raise him up to the time of when he was accountable, and he put him with a good lady. So certainly she continued as she treasured his sayings in her heart. In Luke 2:48 through 51, she respected his authority when he turned the water to wine. She followed him to the cross. She was standing there when he was crucified, and then she was with the apostles in the first chapter of Acts, when they were waiting on the Holy Spirit to join them. So from the beginning to the end, she was as devoted a mother as you could have. So when he said, that's not my mother and brothers and sisters and everybody out there, he wasn't saying that person doesn't measure up to you guys in here. He was saying, she is my earthly mother, but you're all my family. And he didn't say she's not my family, but he did say that you are equally as important to me and to God as those people that are standing out there. What about his brothers and his sisters? Well, the brothers and sisters weren't quite as good as mother. Ron?
I just wanted to say one thing about Jesus at the cross. He told John that this is your mother, so take care of her. And Mary, this is your son.
And back then,
something to that effect.
Women didn't have a place to go back to,
right,
unless somebody took them in. And he told his brother John, take her in as your mother.
John was known as a disciple whom Jesus loved, so he knew that he would be leaving her in good hands.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So his brothers, we know that from Matthew 13, 55 and 56, that Jesus had 4 brothers and at least 2 sisters. We don't know anything about how many sisters he had or their names, but there's a plural there, so there was more than 1 sister, so at least 2. James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas were his brothers. His brothers at first didn't believe him, and you know, when we're talking about this statement that Jesus made at the beginning in Matthew, they at the time they thought there was something wrong with him. You know, they thought he was crazy. You know, on one occasion in Mark 3:21, they challenged him in John 7, go to Jerusalem and do your thing, and they'll probably kill you. And you know, we don't believe you. So certainly at the time that they were standing outside, there was a little bit of that sort of family misunderstanding, family challenge that was going on, because they'd grown up with him, and as far as we know, he wasn't doing miracles when they were growing up with him. So for 30 years, they just saw this older brother that was probably pretty religious, but wasn't doing anything miraculous. And then all of a sudden, he started doing all this miraculous stuff, and even when he was in Nazareth, it says, you know, that he wasn't doing it like he was doing it elsewhere. So, you know, they were probably doubting, like Thomas did. They were doubting whether he was who he ultimately became. They were questioning that because they just knew him, and others in Nazareth that he grew up with said, "Isn't this just the carpenter's son? He can't be special." You know, and a prophet's never respected in his hometown, I think Jesus said. But after, let me make sure this is doing, yeah, after his resurrection, they did come to believe in him. He appeared to James. It says in 1 Corinthians 15:7 that he appeared to his brother James. They continued, the brothers did, with the disciples. So not only was Mary with them in Acts 1:14, waiting on the Holy Spirit to come, but at least some of his brothers were with the disciples when that happened. His brother James eventually wrote the book of James, we're pretty sure, became one of the leaders of the church in Jerusalem when they had the conflict with Antioch, and they sent the people down. He kind of made the statement, here's what you need to do. Not all the other things, you don't have to be circumcised, but there are a few things we think you should do. So we know he was extremely prominent. He, like I said, probably wrote the book of James. And, you know, we don't know this for sure, but we think it's been said, it's been written, that he was martyred by being thrown off the pinnacle of the temple. So he certainly changed his tune for the better. Some people think Judas wrote, his brother Judas wrote the book of Jude, but that's not an absolute thing, but at least some scholars believe that to be true. And in 1 Corinthians 9:5, it says that his brothers were married and traveled teaching the gospel. So certainly they eventually became filled with the Holy Spirit. They eventually became part of his spiritual family, just like they had been part of his earthly, physical family. And that's what everybody hopes and prays for. That's what everybody wishes for, is that your physical family will become part of your spiritual family, because that's the best of all worlds. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen that way. So the conversion of his brothers who were at first skeptical is additional evidence supporting the claim of who he was. And it must have been a wonderful privilege to be part of Jesus' physical family, especially after they came to believe in him. So how about his disciples? His disciples weren't part of his physical family. His disciples used the opportunity to identify themselves as his true family. So that's where we read just a moment ago. You in the room here, my disciples, are my family. And he described anyone who does the will of the Father is his brother, his sister, his mother. So not just that I claim you so I get benefit from it, but if you're doing the will of my Father, then you've truly given yourself over to being one who is going to follow the Father and not follow your earthly desires. Okay, I'm going to move on to the church today. So, we are the people in this room, the people that are in the larger family of Jesus throughout the world are our brothers and sisters. And I think Neil or somebody mentioned on Sunday that some older churches had the habit of calling each other brother and sister, and then that kind of got out of vogue. And if you're not used to it, and somebody walks up and calls you the brother or sister, and you're like, I'm not your brother, I'm not your sister. But certainly that's something that some people have taken this to heart and said, these are my brothers, these are my sisters. And if you talk about that, you sometimes start treating them more like that versus just calling them by name like they're your classmate in school or your friend in some civic organization. You don't call them your brother and sister usually. Now there's some civic organizations that get really tight, and I don't know about some of the clubs that are out there. They may feel that way, but we certainly should feel that way. So Jesus told Peter that his disciples would have 100-fold brothers and sisters. We read in Mark, and most scholars believe, and I believe that that's what he was talking about. We will have 100-folds of brothers and sisters if you leave your earthly ways and you join the family of God. Jesus therefore offers those willing to do my Father's will the opportunity to be born into the family of God by being baptized and to deny yourself of your old life, to enjoy God as our Father, Jesus as our elder brother, and each other as our brothers and sisters. We have countless thousands of brothers and sisters, mothers, fathers, and for those who had poor earthly families, they find the family they were looking for that they never had. And oftentimes those are the people that find the church the easiest when they're get a little older. If you grew up in it, it's kind of natural to you. But if it's not, and you had a bad situation, that's what a lot of people are looking for. Now, sometimes they find that in gangs, and then it doesn't turn out so good. They find that in other bad situations, because most people are looking for a family. Most people are looking for people that they can be intimate with, that they can love, that will love them, that will get up in the middle of the night and come take care of a problem if you need it. That's the kind of thing that most of us are all looking for, and that's the kind of thing that we should be as Christians to our brothers and sisters. But the key is doing the Father's will. The key is to be able to study the Word, to be able to decide what we should be doing, and then the hardest part, I taught a lot of health coaching, and I thought if people knew what to do, they'd all be healthy. But I found out that knowing what you need to do to be healthy and doing what you need to be healthy is two entirely different things. And actually, it's harder to do it than it is to learn what you should be doing. And I think Christianity is not unlike that. I think that and another thing you'll find is that if you've ever, if people that have been exercisers most of their life, they feel really good after they exercise. But most people that never exercised in their life feel awful until they get in pretty good shape. And then I say they've never been over the hill and they've never seen what it's like on the other side, and so they've constantly retract back from that. And I think that's the way Christianity is sometimes. It may be hard initially to start listening to people say things to you don't like, or putting up with the shortcomings, because we all like to hang out with people like us. We all like to hang out with people that do the things we do and don't do the things we don't do, and all those sorts of things. But I don't think Jesus chose all of his apostles and his disciples based on them being all perfect and just like him. He chose tax collectors. He chose all sorts of people, and all throughout the Bible, people were being chosen who wouldn't naturally be a secular choice of who you'd choose to do something. Throughout Jesus' lineage, there were all sorts of people that didn't do what we think they should be doing. And so, Jesus knew them better. God knows them better. He knows what their heart is. But, it's hard sometimes to hang out with people that aren't like you other than your Christian beliefs. And it's easier sometimes to hang out with people that like football, if you're a football fan, or like fill in the blank, whatever I like to do, whatever you like to do. But if you spend enough time with people, you find things in common with them, and you find bonds with them. Ron?
We were talking at home about Solomon and what he asked God for, and he asked him for wisdom. But the human part of Solomon proved to be not very wise. He did a lot of bad things in his life, and God gave him wisdom.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that Americans have to fight more than anywhere else, in most places in the world at least, is the more plenty you have, the less you're driven to go out and find difference, to be different, and all of that. People have to sometimes hit rock bottom to find Jesus, but God forbid that we need to find rock bottom. You would hope that we wouldn't find rock bottom. You'd hope you'd be able to figure it out, but when you're comfortable, getting out and feeding the homeless like Ruth and Kris and everybody's going to take us to do this weekend, is not fun unless you're getting to be a mature Christian. Because it's a lot easier to go do something you like to do. It's a lot easier to say, I'm going to take the kids to do this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to the golf course. If I don't like golf, but I have a lot of friends that love golf. And, if they had the choice of going golfing or feeding the homeless, I know what they're going to choose. But as you mature, you figure out and you look forward. And that's the thing that is so hard is things that you're excited about in the secular world. You think, I'm going to see my favorite artist, I'm going to see my favorite game, I'm going to see my favorite fill in the blank, and you're giddy about it. I remember when I was younger, sometimes I couldn't sleep that night before because I'm going to do that. I don't remember as a young person ever being giddy about going to church. And, historically in the church, it starts at a very young age. You have an ice skating event, and all 20 people in the youth group can come. You have a service event, and 3 of them come. And you say, why couldn't you come? Well, I had to work. But next time you have that ice skating event, I'll work around my work schedule because I just work part-time anyway. So, it starts at a young age, and it continues unless we become spiritually mature people. And I would propose that we become spiritually mature people when we look forward to going and feeding the homeless. We look forward to the opportunity to be Christ-like. We look forward to, doing things that Jesus and God told us to do because they were willing, when we were in a bad place, to love us anyway, to love us while we were yet sinners. We should want to do His will. So serving God is what ties us together in Christ. It binds us together in love. It unites us for the same purpose, the same goals, the same desires. The Church of Jesus Christ, then, is the true family of Jesus today, just like it was the family of Jesus 2,000 years ago. So, we're going to have a lot of time to discuss if we want to, but we're going to go to our conclusion, and then I want to kind of throw it out there, and we're not getting as much feedback tonight as we do sometimes, and I think if we can, everybody's just waiting to ask those questions or to offer those comments and to make sure I get through with my lesson. So because last time I went, I was supposed to do 1 hour and it ended up going into 2. So this time we'll make up for that. So who's our true family? If it's only our physical family, that we're setting ourselves up for great disappointment because our physical family is human, and that's not. We can't put all of our faith in that. If we want a family that lasts for eternity, then we're going to have to make a bond that's spiritual. And hopefully that is with our physical family, but it also has to be with our larger family, with people that we have influence with here and out there. At work, wherever we can have influence, we should be having influence and taking the opportunity to add those people to our family. Went to SunQuest many years ago, and they took the kids into a room and they put them through this. They took half the kids and had them go outside, and then they had half of them stay inside. And they put a person in the middle, and then they put 3 people around them, and they locked arms. And then they put like 6 people around them, and they locked arms. Well, when they got to the bigger ring on the outside, they couldn't lock arms because there weren't enough of them. So then they asked people to come in the room and start pulling them away, and they easily pulled away the people that didn't have somebody to lock arms with. And then they even got through the first line of people with the locked arms before they said stop. And they said, the typical way that humans do things and most churches do things is the people who've been there the longest and have the closest ties are in the middle. And the cliques that we have, our best friends are all locked up and we're all nice and tight. But the people that come in that are the weaker Christian, the newer Christian, are on the outside. And if we'll put them in the middle and surround them and lock arms and show them we love them and protect them, they'll stay. But if we don't invite them, and we went to a church many years ago when our kids were little, and almost everybody there was family with, earthly family, and had been there a long time. And for the first year, our kids didn't get invited to the kids' activities, even though they went to a Bible study and did things with those other kids, but they didn't get invited to anything. 3 or 4 years later, our kids were in the middle of things. We stayed, and they were in the middle of things, but I started noticing that the people that came that were new were still kind of on the outside and weren't necessarily getting their arms wrapped around them. And that's the same thing for us adults in here when visitors come on Sunday. First thing I want to do, natural inclination, is go talk to Eric. I want to go talk to Bill. I want to go talk to Ron. And by the time it's over, the visitors are gone. So, I've had to retrain myself to say, as much as I want to talk to Richard, as much as I want to talk to, everybody in this room, I need to hone in on those people that are visiting and hone into those people that have been here a few times and are really thinking about placing membership and those sorts of things. Because those are going to be my brothers and sisters too. Those are people we need to be looking to add to our family, because that's what Christ was doing all the time. He was constantly out there finding new people to join the family, not just hanging out with his disciples. I mean, he could have had a school of preaching and just taught these apostles, and they could have talked about all the good ways to do this and never gone out and done anything the whole time he was there. But he was on the road the whole time he was there, and, he told people time and again, let the dead bury the dead. Come with me. We have work to do. The fields are white with harvest, and we just need to go reap that harvest. So the last slide before we start opening up lots of conversation, what have you done for your true family lately? Have you gotten to know your brothers and sisters in Christ at an intimate level? Because, you're going to get to know them, their middle names, not just their first and last names. You're going to get to know a lot about them if you're having them over to eat, or you're going out to eat with them, and you're getting involved in their lives and them getting involved in your life. But if you're just saying hi to them on Sunday, and if you're lucky on Wednesday, and those sorts of things, you're not in a life group. You're probably going to have closer friends outside than you are here. And even if your friends are here, it's not a big family, it's a little clique. So we all have to get out of our comfort zones. One of the hardest things with life groups is splits, because you meet with people for a year and you get really close to them, and then the leadership says, hey, you need to move around and get to know more people and mix it up a little bit. Well, I don't want to leave my friends. I actually have people now I can be intimate with. I have people I know about and I can talk to. Well, you can still be intimate with those people. You can still invite those people over, on a different night of the week, or you can, go out to lunch with them on Sunday and catch up with them. And my experience has been that once you've been in a life group for a while with someone and then you're no longer with it, you still carry on that relationship. I still look for them on Sunday. I still do those things that I might not do with someone that I hadn't developed that relationship with. But life is so full of, Neil talks about how much junk we have. Well, life is full of so much junk called entertainment and all those sorts of things that we don't really make time, unless we make time, to get intimate, to get to know our brothers and sisters closer. And then when you find out something that's going on bad in their life, do you go tell a couple of friends and say, this is terrible, and pretty soon everybody in the church knows? Or do you pray with them and do you say, how can I help you? And you may have a partner that you can pray about it with and say, hey, can we go help that person? But spreading the word around that they're having trouble in a group of people that aren't all mature Christians is not helping. But helping that person is helping. Finding out how you can help them through that is showing them love. Discipling, wow, that's hard. But that's what we were told to do. We were told to go out and disciple other people, which means we need to find people that are discipling us. We need to find mentors. We need to find people that are arm in arm with us doing things. And then we need to find some kids, some young adults. If you're a parent that raised your own kids and you can find some young parents that are saying, oh my goodness, my daughter said she's about to have a child that's about to go from pre-kindergarten to kindergarten, and one of the older ladies in the church said, it's going to be very different when they get to kindergarten. And she's like, well, I need to go ask some people that have done this before. But too many young people today want to go read about it in a book and see what Dr. Spock, well, that's aging me because they don't read Dr. Spock anymore. That was about 50 years ago. But there was a time when, young parents didn't think their parents knew anything in the 60s, and so they went and read a book by a guy that never had any kids, but he was the expert on raising kids. And really the wisest people are the people sitting among us. They should be going to those that have raised kids, and, don't do what one person tells you every time. That also won't work. but you should be asking, not your peers. I'm speaking to the wise here because there's a lot of people here that have already done it. But were we to be talking, those online that have young kids that may not have been able to come tonight, but they're listening, find you some older ladies or older men and say, I'm having this problem with my child. How do I deal with it? Don't go read a secular book on how to deal with it. Because there's... Amen to that. The older women should not be waiting on the younger women. For those that didn't hear that, they should be seeking them out. And that's what discipling is about. The older women should be finding the younger women. The younger women should be finding the kids. The older men should be finding the younger men. And we need to be bringing them up. And Neil, about a year ago, was teaching about spiritual maturity. And we often forget that gray-haired people may be spiritual infants. And sometimes 30 and 40-year-olds could be very mature Christians. So, it's not just the chronologic age that we're dealing with. Sometimes it's the maturity level. And we even mature different levels in different things. I know kids that are very mature in elementary school at certain things and still extremely immature at other things. Well, Christians are the same way. You can think he's or she's a very mature Christian. And then you can find an area where they're still struggling. And that's oftentimes where a peer can help because, they're pretty mature, so they're looking for somebody else that's pretty mature, but they may not struggle with the same thing, and they may be able to find somebody that can be a partner for them to help them through it. Are you encouraging each other to do the Father's will? We should be encouraging each other to go out and do the things that the Bible tells us to do, that Jesus was doing, that Paul was doing. Most of the people in the secular world today that even call themselves Christians, if you look at the way they spend their lives, maybe even some of us, but certainly myself, certainly not spending their time the way Jesus and Paul and Stephen and Peter and James and John and all those people spent their time. And we don't have to do everything they did, but we need to be looking at what it looks like to be living a Christian life versus saying, we live in a country where we don't have to worry so much about what they did. We don't have to worry about the Jews throwing us in jail and stoning us and the Romans throwing us in the lion's den and all those things, that they kept doing those things even when those things were happening. And Paul said, count it all great. If I'm suffering for, James said, count it all great when you suffer for Jesus. I'm not here to tell you I raise my hand when I start suffering that if I'm suffering for Jesus' sake, I struggle with the idea that I should be counting it great. I think, why me? Because that's the natural inclination. Why me? But that's not what we're supposed to be doing. And hopefully we get spiritually mature enough. And, sometimes you get that why me as an initial reaction. And then a few minutes later, if you're mature, even mature people have a moment of frustration. Jesus had a moment of frustration. But we ultimately have to understand and refocus ourselves spiritually and say, it's not about me. Never was about me. and we have very few divisions, if you remember that. We have very few divisions in the church or anywhere else if you realize that, you can't really offend me because it's not about me. But that's hard. That's very hard. All right. We have about 8 more minutes for somebody else to add back. And I knew Bill was going to help us out here. I asked him at the beginning, but he's been ever so quiet.
It's instructive that when you read 1st, 2nd Timothy and Titus, that when Paul sent Timothy to Ephesus and he sent Titus to Crete, which were probably, if you read the historical accounts, 2 of the most dysfunctional congregational areas, and there were probably multiple small congregations in that area. but some of the most dysfunctional Christians that you will ever find. The first thing he told them to do is, Timothy, teach these people in Ephesus about family relationships. Teach the younger men to treat older men like fathers. Teach younger women to teach older women like mothers. Teach people how to be brothers and sisters. And he told Titus the same thing in Crete. Teach them these family relationships. Not everybody learns that at home, but teach them to do that. Teach them how to get along with one another, how to respect one another, how to work together, and those sorts of things, and then begin to come in with the doctrinal issues. Relationships are the fundamental issue that we have, and it's when we talk about the family of Jesus, we talk about our family here in the congregation. We need to go back to those old tapes about how we are supposed to be treating mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters. Maybe not how you did it when you were a kid growing up. Maybe that wasn't the model you want to use. But nevertheless, that's what Paul told these two outstanding missionaries to do. Start off by teaching them family relationships, and then the rest will follow from there. It's also instructive that Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy 5:8 that anyone who does not take care of his immediate family, and when he's talking about taking care of him, he's talking about physically, mentally, emotionally, in all sorts of ways, is worse than an infidel. And what Jesus said about leaving mother, father, son, houses, and that kind of thing notwithstanding, I believe that one of our most important ministries is to our immediate family. I've known men who gave so much time and effort to the church that they ignored their families. And I don't believe God looks kindly on that, because those are the closest relationships that we should have. So who is our family? Well, our family begins with our biological family, but then it spreads. And we learn the lessons of our immediate biological families, and then we spread that to our spiritual family, to our Christian family. And then it's from there that we're able to do the mission of Jesus.
And I think you make some fantastic points, and I think Titus and Timothy went to dysfunctional places that didn't know how to have a good family, and he told them, pick men for elders and deacons who rule their family well, and all those things. And Jesus said, when you didn't honor your father and mother, you Pharisees gave them away not to honor your father and mother by giving money to us, and then you don't have to honor them. And he said, that's horrible. But maybe in the Jewish culture, the challenge that he was dealing with in his ministry was not dealing with people that didn't understand family, because typically the Jewish culture valued family unlike those people in Crete. Those people, they were Gentiles, and I'm sure there are cultures that would be considered Gentiles that still value family, but they weren't. They were scoundrels, scoundrels of all scoundrels. So yeah, there's that challenge, and I think anybody, and you've seen it, I've seen it, preachers, elders that get so caught up in the work of the church that they neglect their family. I saw it as physicians who got so caught up in their work. When I was on a cardiology rotation in my 4th year of medical school, they told me to come in at 7, and I came in and the cardiologist had already written notes, and they sent me home at 11 p.m., and the next morning I came back and they had written notes after 11 p.m. for an evening note, and before I got in at 7 a.m. for the next one. And you know what I said? I said, that's the people I want to take care of my heart if I ever have a heart problem, because they're here 24/7. But I would hate to be their wife, their child, their family, because they wouldn't even know them. I mean, they were asleep when they came home. That's awful. That's not a family thing. Miss Charlotte, you got a microphone, so...
I think we have to be careful and find the balance between the importance of family in your personal home family and our family from church. Because if and when your family, your earthly family, is saying, oh, but we have a family event and it's more important than you going to church today, or than you supporting the youth program, or you supporting whatever the church has going on, if you allow that to happen on a regular basis, then to me, you're not only failing your church family, but you're showing a poor example to your earthly family. And that's a hard balance, I think, for us to take, because it requires us to take a stand against those that we love so much in our personal family.
And I think going back to Dr. Spock, and since that time, my parents didn't subscribe to the techniques of Dr. Spock. I would have been a much more pampered kid if I had been, and I'm sorry that I didn't get that, but I think as an adult, mature adult, I'm glad I didn't get that. But, they didn't prioritize all of my events over their events. I was part of the family, and I got to do one sport in school. I got to choose which one I wanted to do. And, if there had been traveling, they wouldn't have let me do traveling because the family had things they had to do and responsibilities they had to do. Today, the secular world teaches us that, your kids need to be entertained, your kids need to be busy doing things other than spiritual things all the time. And most families, particularly since World War II, when the wife started working as well as the husband, there's been an increasing sort of, I'm not spending enough time with neither one of us are spending enough time with our kids. So the whole time we're there at night or on the weekends, we need to be doing stuff with them that entertains them, because we're not here to be there, where traditionally, before World War II, most of the time one of the parents stayed home and one of them worked. And the kids got a lot of attention. And then before that, I don't know if there's maybe a couple of people in this room that when we had a big seminar on manhood, it talked about the fact that back before 1900, most people either had small businesses or farms, and the kids grew up in the business, on the farm, with their father and with their mother. And that was a very different way to grow up with the family, working in the family business and all of that, than the way we are now, where initially the man went out and started doing all the work and the woman still stayed home, and then now both of them are out working. And I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying it creates all sorts of new problems of how you deal with that, and it creates a lot of guilt among parents who don't feel like they can be all they can be as males or females, adults, and all they can be as parents, because all of a sudden I'm failing at both, and I need to do something. I need to try to figure that out. And so, it's never been more difficult than it is now. But I think we can go back and there's ways to do that if we work together in doing that. Will we, Bill? Thank you. A little bit of Charlotte. Oh, we have. Yes.
I was just going to say about what Bill had said. It's key to be friends with people outside. That was initially how we started the work over in Greece. Steve was a child there at the age of 6, and so firsthand he saw what his parents did, and then we were trying to emulate that, but to make friends with them so that they start liking you, and then they start trusting you, and then they believe you. You can't just invite someone over and you're from America and you're going to teach an Orthodox person about the Bible. It was in their language, so we had it in the ancient Greek and the Koine and then the Katharevousa. So for the older people that didn't know the modern Greek, but it just worked. It was amazing how it worked, just opening your home and loving the people. And Steve said, you don't have to learn the language. You will learn it, just kind of through osmosis. He said, my mom didn't really learn it that well, but the people loved her. They treated her like Mother Mary. She was just, always had people in their home, staying with them. And that's how the word, that's how they spread the word over there.
Well, some people think, giving a sermon, giving a talk is scary, and standing up and giving a talk. But, I've heard many, many times, seeing a sermon is far more powerful than giving a sermon. And, she was living it and examining it, and that's what people flow to. People come to people that are living it, not people who are talking about it. There's way too many people that are, and I think if there's one thing that most of the churches that I've been involved with in over the years, and I think a lot of the people in their 20s and 30s today, like my kids' age, they share with me all the time that a lot of their friends left the church because they talk about it all the time, but they never do any of it. And I'm talking about getting out of here. they're fantastic at Bible knowledge. They're fantastic at going on Sundays and Wednesdays and those sorts of things, but they're not out there living it and seeking the lost and feeding the homeless and doing all the things that they read that was going on in the New Testament. And, we are hopefully challenging each other to get out there, and that's not the only thing to do. But even where you work, just living and being that person at work that everybody respects, because you don't respond like everybody else when you get mad. You don't respond like everybody else when divisiveness occurs. You're not the gossiper at work, and all those sorts of things. Yes, sir.
My question is then, we were so bad back then why during the 50s and the late 40s, that was the best time the Churches of Christ ever grew the fastest, was in the late 40s and during the 50s. And we got out there and we worked, we visited homes, we visited each other, and that we did not let society teach our children.
And amen.
We taught our children, but now today, society is teaching our children exactly what they want to teach them.
Well, amen to all of that, Daryl, and it's interesting. I mentioned how it was when I was growing up, and I know I've got gray hair now, but I wasn't alive in the 40s and the 50s. I actually was born in the last year of the 50s, and so I think it did grow wildly when we had bus ministries and we knocked on doors, even though some people told you to get out of here, and go to the next door. But we quit doing that for a great part by the 60s and the 70s, and it's just gotten more and more that way, and I think that's what we're hoping to try to do here, is not to lose any of the biblical knowledge, not to lose any of the teaching, not to lose any of the making sure we do the things scripturally right, but to add back to that the things we should be doing that are getting out there involved with the lost and helping them, and not preaching to them. Unless you're preaching that sermon like Carolyn was telling us about. You're preaching to them by showing them what Christianity really is, the love we have for one another, the love we have for them, but not preaching to them by barking out, because if you don't get involved in their life and they don't trust you.
You can talk about love all you want, but until you show it and do something to show it, and that you really don't have love. You're just talking out of the side of your mouth.
Oh, absolutely. Talking about love, or even just accepting everybody for how they are and telling them you love them anyway, that's not real love. Yep.
I can see that we're excited about coming to church or being around our fellow Christians or anything like that. When they see that in our life, that we're excited, then I think that shows the love. I think, then we have steps in the love and we can express it that way. That's just, and also I think it's the relationships. We talked about the young women and the older women, but I feel it's just equal responsibility for the old men and the younger men to build those relationships, even though most of the time the nurturing and things are for the wife in the home, for the children, but the men have such a great responsibility for overseeing that household. And to me, it's such joy here with Harrison, our 14-year-old, that any man goes up and just talks to him in the congregation, and he knows that, and he talks about that. And you have conversations with him, and he feels the love, not just from us or from the women, but the men. And I think that's very important in his life.
Well, we saw Logan a couple of weeks ago. What an incredible job he did. Bryce has been leading a life group twice now, my understanding. Harrison, I love talking to Harrison. He and I are developing quite a bond. So that's what we should be doing. That's what we all should be doing. And we were surprised when the and by the way, we can keep doing online or we can't, but we don't have to quit until we quit in here. But getting involved, finding a young man or a young woman to encourage, to give wise things to, and this all of a sudden dynamic youth, going to each person's game. Bill mentioned yesterday, I'm not going to mention names, but he said there's a couple of people he would have fallen over dead before he would have thought they would have come. We offered that opportunity, and there they were, over and again, coming to these kids' things. So all we need to do is give them an opportunity.